Welcome to Salaam Nerds Podcast. We do reviews and recaps of your favorite TV shows. We are an inclusive recap show.
Yo, it's the Salaam Nerds. My name is Steve, aka Watch Me Leave, and I'm here with my boy Jazz.
We drop live episodes on YouTube on Sundays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. All episodes can also be found everywhere podcasts are found. Thank you to all our supporters. Please help us by subscribing and leaving a good review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Yo, Salaam Nerds. This is your boy Neebs, aka Watch with Neebs, and welcome to today's special wrestling episode of Salaam Nerds. I'm your host, Neebs, aka Watch with Neebs, and I'm going to introduce, hailing from Houston, Texas, the man, icon, the legend, DJ Jazz.
It's the man, the myth, the legend.
What did I say? I don't even know.
The man, icon.
Oh yeah, icon's better. That's more of a wrestling thing. The man, the myth, the legend is the Ric Flair thing. You can't copy him. You got to come up with your own. But listen, you're not the only one. Today, we have a triple threat match. Do you know what that means? Jazz has
know what it means.
Jazz has no idea. All right, listen. He is from New York. You have seen him do poetry. You have seen him with takes on TikTok. You have seen him with takes on Instagram. He is also a legend in his own right. Welcome, Nub the Poet.
Thank you. That was amazing. You have no idea. I've always wanted a wrestling intro, and I will take this as the first step to getting like a proper one. This is great.
I know. I got to practice my Harvey, who's the guy? Henry Finkel. I think he was one of the announcers.
Howard Finkel.
Howard Finkel. That's the guy. Oh my God, he used to love it. And who was the other one? There was another one who used to do announcement. It was the Road Dog, Jesse James. He was like, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, D Generation X proudly presents you. I remember that back in the day. I used to love that.
Yeah.
Oh man, this is gonna be a fun episode because I have not gotten a chance to talk about wrestling for a while. The last time we talked about wrestling was when I think you came on the show and we were just happened to randomly start talking about wrestling. The episode was about Hassan Minaj, and it just the conversation just fled into wrestling somehow, which I think is all your fault because I haven't talked about wrestling in years. I was a wrestling fanatic from the 80s to the 90s, and then around 2002 I stopped watching wrestling because I was in college. Electrical engineering was way too hard. I couldn't keep up, so I had to give up wrestling, and then I just couldn't get back into it. I really wanted to, but I couldn't get back into it. There was so many new characters and so many storylines that I just wasn't aware of. It's like watching a soap opera from the middle and you don't know anything that happens before. But no, you've been watching it for a while, right?
Yeah, I do want to say first, you sound like a lot of MCU fans. Now there's all I have to catch up on.
I do.
But yeah, I've been watching this since I was 7 years old. I probably stopped watching for a bit in high school, early college. But my older brother, we're both huge fans, and he never stopped watching. And he would always say wrestlers catchphrases and stuff, and I was just like, what are you talking about? It was annoying as someone who kind of distanced himself from it. And then I just got back into it. I don't even remember what the reason was. I just jumped back in, and I realized it's something I've always loved, but you start to think oh, this isn't cool, and you're a teenager trying to be whatever. So but ever since then, ever since 2006,
yeah,
I've just nonstop been a huge fan. I was even like, oh, what do I wear for the show? And I was like, I have a CM Punk hoodie. Why would I not wear that?
Nice. Love that. I love that. Jazz, what do you have any background in wrestling? Do you know anything about professional wrestling?
So I used to watch WWF back then.
Yeah.
And now it's WWE. I used to watch SmackDown every Thursday. Never really got into Raw because Monday nights were bad for me when I was younger. But this was like the, Stone Cold Steve Austin. The Rock was there. One wrestler I really remember was like Chris Jericho. He was like some 2-belt champion way back then. Like, that was the era I watched wrestling. Recently, I'll later this month, Royal Rumble's happening, and my friends and I can do a barbecue. I'm just gonna watch that, but like I haven't really kept up with it ever since.
Nice. So for me, this movie, The Iron Claw, was amazing because this was when I was watching wrestling, right? Like the late 80s and the early 90s. Like I remember some of the stuff that happened live. Like it was jarring to see almost. There was one scene in this movie where you see Kerry Von Erich, aka the Texas Tornado in WWF back in the day, and he has a SummerSlam match with Mr. Perfect. I remember watching that match. Like it's so weird to me to see that same exact match played in the movie and it be part of the storyline. And I'm just like, whoa, man, I was there for this. Like I wasn't physically there, but I was like there. I was like, I knew about this person in that time, and it's wild to me.
They're writing the history books, and you experienced it, and they can correct it when they're wrong. This didn't really happen.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things that this movie kind of changed, right? I think one of the biggest things that this movie changed is they left out a brother. Chris Von Erich was also a brother who tragically died from suicide, and they completely wrote him out. And it sucks because I feel like he should have been in the movie, but I also understand why pacing would be an issue because even with all the brothers, I feel like it was just one tragedy after another, and it kind of felt rushed. It didn't give every single brother's tragedy to breathe. And I feel like if they added another brother, it would have been the same thing. It would have been even less time for them to breathe. So I understand the idea of it being a pacing issue, but I also I don't care. I feel like he should have been in there because his story is also really sad, and we'll probably get into it while we're talking about this. But Nov, what are your thoughts about them leaving out one of the brothers?
Yeah, I think I share similar sentiments in the sense of it's unfortunate, but I also get why. Especially like I have a similar view on the movie itself. I think it's really well made. The performances are really strong for the most part. But it felt kind of more like a biopic or a documentary, because it was just like you said, like the events of the downfalls or the tragedies of the family just were like one after the other, and it was just like scene after scene after scene, where it kind of was like there wasn't really a overall like narrative to the movie,
Yeah.
So it was like, so I could totally understand that having another brother and trying to tell another story and what was already like just a lot of kind of, there was messiness. It was well made and well done, but there was some messiness in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately just part of making a movie is you do have to leave some things out, and yeah, so it's not good. I don't like it overall, but I also get it, especially as someone who creates like videos myself, as a video production person myself. So
Yeah, I actually that's a good point, because I'll make TikToks and I'd be like, I really want this point to come across, but then I'm like, this is feeling a little long-winded. I need to probably cut this out, and I totally get what you mean by that. So this movie is about the Von Erich curse. So everyone knows about like the Von Erich curse, who's like been a wrestling fan. A lot of tragedy befalls this family, but not just the family, even people like involved with the family. Like if you watch some of like the old WCCW stuff, they were wrestlers called the what's his name? I forgot his name, but there was Gino Hernandez and Bruiser Brody. Those were two wrestlers who also died in the WCCW, and they were also closely related to the Von Erichs, not by blood, but at least like they were like very close with them in terms of like business wise. A lot of stuff happened, and it was like people were like, anytime anything bad happens, people were like, it's the Von Erich curse, to the point where like they actually even once tried to lean into it, and people did not like that. There was a storyline where they pretended that the father had a heart attack right after, I think, Carrie died, or no, I think right after Mike died. They tried to do the storyline like the father had a heart attack in the ring, and that did not go well at all, because it was like, you're trying to capitalize on your own tragedies. It's kind of, it didn't sit right with a lot of people, and that started the downfall of WCCW, and it was probably going nowhere. And then what happened is they sold it to NWA, they sold it to a bunch of other people. So what a lot of people don't know is that wrestling, give you a little bit of background. Now we have WWF, WWE. It's like this big, huge monopoly of wrestling, but wrestling wasn't like that. It was in territories back in the day. So we had like AWA, we had NWA, we had WCCW, we had WWF, and then we had the Polynesian wrestling down in Hawaii, which people know the Polynesian one mostly from Chief Maivia, who is the grandfather of Rocky Maivia, who is now known as The Rock. They had their own wrestling organization down there. WCCW was the Von Erichs. Like the Von Erichs were like the royalty there. Then Jerry the King Lawler had his own wrestling organization, and then a few other people had their own. So before WWF came along and just kind of like, ran them out of business, it was a bunch of territories. It wasn't just like one wrestling company for the whole country. It was a bunch of territories. And then WCW came along to kind of, fight WWF back in the day. And they were all, WCW was also a like national wrestling organization. But it was very interesting because you would find them on the weirdest channels back in the day. And that's a little bit of like my history knowledge of like what wrestling was like back in the day. Nav, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, you covered a lot of it. It's similar to like thinking, I mean, I'm trying to think of a good comparison to other like pop culture in a way. I guess like it doesn't really work because everything else is like, everything nowadays is like one or two big companies, and then there's a bunch of like independent or smaller, so it is hard to think of something similar that at least that comes to my mind. But yeah, I mean,
I got an example.
Sure.
College football, where we used to have 6 automatic qualifying conferences. Now we are down to, well, depending on who you ask, we are down to 3 or 4 or 5. And so, it used to be like every region had their own conference. But now in the era of consolidation, right, we really have the big 2. Then we have one right below that. And we have one on the verge of death. And one that has completely collapsed.
Okay, that's a good analogy. So before we get into spoilers, let's talk about this movie as a whole. Like, what were your thoughts about this movie? I know you said it was a well-made movie, but like, what did you like about it? What did you not like about it? What really hit home? What were things you think they could have done better? Nav, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So to kind of expand on points I made earlier, performances, 99% of them amazing. I mean, Zac Efron, the movie hinges on his performance, and he knocks it out of the park. Like he delivers all the right emotional beats. All of the family members do, I feel, honestly. Like all the main cast, I think, do a really excellent job. So that's like literally what this movie required, right? If the performers were not good, much like in actual professional wrestling, like if you don't have talented performers, it's not gonna look good. It's not gonna feel, authentic, or it's not gonna appeal, So really, like, props to him though, because 90% of the movie is him and what he's going through in his journey. So the performance is really good. I liked a lot of the story told. Again, it felt kind of disjointed, right? So like the first, I don't know if I want to, you said before we get into spoilers, so I don't know how much I should be sharing, but I just felt like the first half was building towards something, and then the second half was kind of just like all the bad stuff that happened to the family. And then there was no, I don't want to say resolution, but it just felt kind of like empty. It was just like, okay, and then the movie's over. And I was like, oh, that's weird. you know?
Yeah.
And the other thing that kind of it's mixed for me was the actual like in-ring performance. I think the wrestlers did good, or like the actors did a good job. But some of the camera work during the matches was really weird. Like they'd be like zoomed in on like the side of the file, and then it would be just moving really fast. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what you're trying to convey with this frantic energy. So that was really frustrating. Because and it wasn't like they were doing something. I could understand if it was like a move that maybe they wanted to hide, maybe the performers not being able to do the move well, but it was like lockups and punches and stuff, and I was just like, why are we getting all wild here?
I thought it was done. There were some things I think were done pretty artistically. I think there were some scenes where like he's going back and forth to the rope, and then when he's practicing, you just see him slam on the ground over and over and over again. I think one of the things that I really like about this movie is that it actually treats wrestling with respect, right? Like we know wrestling is quote unquote fake, but this makes you realize like how even though it's scripted, it's real. Like becoming a champion is like a promotion. Like they tell you, like you have to win over the crowd. You can't be just given a platform. You have to earn it in a way, or else the audience won't connect with you. And then when you get suplexed on concrete and you can't get up for like 10 seconds, like that's real. Like I love the fact that they went into that and they showed the bruising and the pain and the hurt that they have. And shout out to the actors. I believe the actors were taught by Chavo Guerrero, who is related to Eddie Guerrero, the legendary wrestler. He trained a lot of these guys, and he did a good job because they said 99% of like all the moves were the actors. Like very little, like from the top turnbuckle to the lockups, everything was done by these guys. So it was very, very well done by them. Zac Efron gave the performance of his life. This is the best thing I've ever seen Zac Efron in. I haven't seen him in a lot of stuff, but this is the best thing I've ever seen him in. He does such a good job of like holding in his emotion while still having so much to portray. I thought he was done really good. I do feel like a lot of the other brothers should have been shown a little bit more. I feel like it's really wild to me that like Carrie doesn't get enough screen time, even though he's the most famous of all of them, and the most tragic of all of them. And it was, but I understand the point of like telling the whole story from Kevin's perspective, but I still think we should have saw more of Carrie. I think we should have saw more of the mom. I really think we should have saw more of the wife. And you know, give some of these characters a little bit more room to breathe. But it was just shot really well when it comes to like capturing the emotions of some of these scenes. I thought they were really, really done, and the respect that they give to wrestling, I thought was really well done.
I got a question.
Sure.
Did you say wrestling was quote unquote fake?
That's what people say. Wrestling is quote unquote fake, but it's not fake. It's scripted, right? And it's no different than going on American.
What?
Well, here's the thing, right? Like you have
spoiler alert for anybody who did not know, by the way.
Well, that's what's so interesting about this movie, because this movie takes place in the 80s, back when people thought wrestling was real. These people were rock stars to them. They couldn't get into the ring without women running up to them and kissing them. Like it was wild. It was a strange time back in the day. And now it's really weird for us because everybody knows wrestling is fake. But like,
no, it's not.
like people like fake on like what they say, right? Like when I say fake, I mean like when people dismiss it. That's the term they use. But like just because something is scripted doesn't mean that like everything that involves in the art of wrestling is fake. Like the moves are real, the pain is real, things are pre-scripted, there is communication happening in the ring, but that doesn't take away from anything that these guys are doing, and that still doesn't take away from who the champion is, because a champion is like a promotion. Like if you're doing good at your job, you will become a champion, right? And like they will give people, sometimes people won't get the shot they deserve and they never get there, but sometimes, you know, you get the shot to become a champion, and if the crowd doesn't connect with you or you don't put a good performance, they take away that shot, or they'll give you a championship and they'll actually, you know, take it away right after 18 days later, which a lot of people don't know actually happened to Kerry Von Erich. When Kerry Von Erich won the NWA champion and they show him getting an accident like the day of, that's not real. He actually didn't get into that accident 2 years later. But they took away his title 18 days after he won it. So he never had it for that long because the audience didn't connect with it, because he got it right after his brother died. And people were like, oh, they just gave it to him because it was supposed to be David. And the audience just wouldn't connect with it. And like the other wrestlers wouldn't connect with it either. They kind of felt like they gave it to him almost like a pity thing, and it didn't connect. And even though he got it, they took it away right after. And a lot of it had to do with his attitude too. Like he was missing bookings and stuff like that, and he was on drugs. But there's a lot of backstory to some of the stuff that's happening.
You know, I was totally messing with you when you said
I know you were, but I definitely think that like people want to hear this backstory. So let's start recapping. Let's go into spoilers, because this is going to be a fun one.
Okay.
So Jazz, anything you want to say before we start?
Nope.
All right. All right. So this movie starts off in black and white a little bit. We see their family, and they're very young, and the mom won't come watch them wrestle. The dad, is a wrestler, and he never got his shot. He always thought that he was about to get a shot. He's, saying like, I'm going to get it. It's going to change our lives. It never happened. He never becomes an NWA champion. But he starts living this like lifestyle. He bought them a Cadillac, and his wife is like, you can't be doing this. We can't afford this. And you kind of see like his dad is kind of stubborn. He's a little bit of a force to be reckoned with. He can't like be convinced to a lot of things. And it kind of sets up like what kind of relationship they're going to have with their dad. One of the things that the movie doesn't tell you that their dad was actually not just a wrestler. He had another job. He was a detective and a firefighter. So he did a few other jobs too. He wasn't just a wrestler. But what people don't know is that Texas was one wrestling organization. And then what happened if it broke off into two? So Dallas and Fort Worth became one, and then Houston and San Antonio became another. And what happened was his dad became a booker and a promoter for the WCCW. And the guy he was partnering up with actually passes away. He dies, and he gives him the whole business. And that's how he becomes the wrestler. And he was a villain. He was a heel. He was called Fritz Von Erich, and Von Erich was supposed to be like this German character, and he was supposed to be like a bad guy. So he did that for a while, and he was actually a champion for a long time. He was their biggest star, which is interesting because that actually happened quite a lot in wrestling. So like promoters who were the owners of the company would also be wrestlers of the company and make themselves champion. So like Jerry the King Lawler was the biggest star in his, and the Von Erichs were the biggest stars in theirs, because if you have another champion, your whole company relies on this person. You can't put your entire company in the hands of another person, but you can't put it in your own hands. So he was a champion for a while, and then when he started to retire, he started putting his sons in matches because it felt like, his sons were people that he could depend on. But there were definitely a lot of other people that came through WCCW that people know about. The Freebirds were one of the biggest thing. And you might know that Michael Hayes is a very popular person in WWF now. He was also in the Freebirds. He was one of their biggest stars of WCCW. He was, outside of the Von Erichs, he was the biggest star there. And he had a crazy rivalry with the Von Erich, like a legendary rivalry. Kamala, the Ugandan giant, also came from WCCW. So it's really, really cool to see like some of these characters. What do you think about, the backstory of their dad?
Like you mean in the movie or
in the movie?
Yeah, I think it's pretty. That's another thing that they kind of they didn't even really touch upon it, right? They were just like, he was a wrestler, and then the next scene, he's now booker, promoter, and you have no idea about any of this that you just shared, right? So like, you don't get a sense, not that you don't get a sense of the dad, because you do throughout the movie, but I feel like that whole like desire of him to become champion and then basically imposing it on his sons, I think there could have been more to that, right? To really like inform the audience of his, almost like how it almost drove him insane, basically, how he feels like his family, he is constantly being slighted and constantly being, held back. And then his sons also seem to be getting held back by other people or not given the opportunities. So I think there was more they could have added there. And even like their relationship in general. The movie does a great job of the brothers' relationship. I will say that.
It does an amazing job.
Yeah, I really do love it. I mean, like pretty much any scene with just the brothers, I was like always honed in on, So but like you had mentioned, I wish there was more with the dad and the mom. Like they were hinting to things with the mom, but nothing came to fruition or nothing was revealed or shown about like her feelings about the business or about what they're doing. It was almost very like South Asian family like, of just like, well, the dad is the patriarch and therefore what he says goes and deal with it kind of thing.
Yeah, that was really interesting. They do bring up that, like, when they find out that Mike wants to go into singing, they're like, your dad was a singer back in the day, which is really interesting. Another thing we don't know about the dad, in the movie, we find out that Kerry is actually going to go on the Olympics as a disc thrower, and because of what's happening in politics, they cancel the Olympics. What they don't tell you is their dad was also an Olympic disc thrower, and he couldn't go to the Olympics because the school wouldn't pay for his travel. So like so that's where this idea of a curse comes into play in the movie, because we find out that his dad never got to be the NWA champion. He never got to be a Olympic disc thrower. And then you find out there's tragedy happen where his oldest son gets electrocuted and drowns, right, in Niagara. And it's crazy. And then this idea of like a whole curse starts coming in, and it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like this curse becomes almost real to the extent where you're like watching this movie and like you're like there's no way this could be true. There's one family cannot go through this much trauma, and then you learn that like they actually left out a brother, so the real story is even sadder. It's crazy. It's very,
and they didn't even tell what like I don't know as much about the Von Erichs. I'm just familiar with them as a wrestling family, and I know, but I didn't have a chance to like look up all this information. So that's not something they share about what happened to the first brother, right? They just say he died young, but they don't tell what happened. And I feel like knowing the way of his death impacts like your then like suspension of disbelief to like the curse, right?
yeah.
And so I feel like leaving out a lot of these little pieces of the history and their family's legacy is just like, I get it, it's a film, you have a certain amount of time, but
Sure.
I feel like there's certain ways you could have portrayed or at least shared certain things to like really, because that was the focus, right? Was this curse and like Kevin kind of starting to like really buy into it as things continued to happen, and that really affecting him on a emotional and also like on a personal level in terms of the things going on in his life. So if it is such a big like cloud hanging over him, I feel like adding all these other elements would have given more weight to that cloud.
Yeah. And I like the fact that you brought up Kevin, because this really affects Kevin's entire personality, because he was the younger brother and his older brother passes away, and now he feels like the older brother. And you see him like come down to dinner, and his dad's like, Carrie's my favorite, then you, then you, then you. And he's kind of ranking his sons and trying to make them fight for his affection. And we see how he treats Mike, and he's like really, really hard on him. And you see Kevin is the one that goes and tries to defend him. He goes, he goes to his mom and goes, hey, your dad's being really hard on Mike. Can you talk to him? And she's like, no, I don't get involved in anyone's business. Like, I don't get involved in the business. And I was like, what the fuck is wrong with his mom? I'm like, what? But it really shows how like Kevin just like really loved his brothers, and they really loved Mike, and they really like taking care of him. And they looked out for each other, and you really get that sense of brotherhood. And I think the movie did a really great job of displaying that. What are your thoughts about the way the dad treated them and how they treated Mike?
Yeah, I mean, that again, like I think there could have been more to it, but even with what they gave us, I think it was pretty effective because it was juxtaposed with like the brothers' love for each other.
Yeah.
And so like even the moment of it was less the dad, but you know, it was they wouldn't let Mike go to perform at a college. He's in a band.
Yeah.
And he calls it a quartet. And I was like, it's a band, man.
Give it the times.
But his parents are basically like, you can't go. His mom says no, and then his dad's like, she said no, and I'm like, well, that's strange. And they all were like, even before they snuck out, the brothers were like, we'll go, we'll take him, no problem. And they still said no, but then they snuck out and they all went together, and they're just like having a good time. Like every scene with the brothers is so loving. And even though like they have that whole thing of Fritz ranking his favorites, it never showed. There's like maybe one moment where you can argue it kind of does, but it never really factors into them caring for each other, right? Like they clearly, that doesn't supersede their love for each other. And I think that is like literally the way they were glued together is what like is the glue of the movie, is the fact that you have such like love emitting from these brothers at all times in like every scene pretty much. Like even when they are sometimes at a bit of an odds, they like come to an understanding, or they apologize, or they say like, hey, you're still my brother, I still love you. Like it's never super antagonistic where they're like, I hate you, man. Like it's never
like even when there's like a little bit of jealousy or there's like competing, they're still like loving to each other. Like it's really, really nice to see. I really, really did enjoy that portion of the movie. Someone mentioned Zach deserves an Oscar nom for this. Yeah, I feel like this is probably some of his best acting I've ever seen. It was phenomenal. The other thing is, so they go and they have a few wrestling matches. They show us a few wrestling matches, and we realize that like Kevin is not the best on the mic, which is thing in wrestling. Like in wrestling, you not only have to be a good technical wrestler, but you also have to be really well spoken on the mic. You have to be very charismatic as a character, and you have to be a good wrestler. These are all the things that involve, and all of the brothers were very different. Like you see Kerry was the most built. He was the one who had the body. He looked like a Greek god, right? And you see David was the one who was the best on the mic. He was charismatic. He can tell the story. He can push the story. And then Kevin was somewhere in the middle. And Kevin was supposed to get the push to become the next champion and fight Ric Flair. Also, do you want to talk about Ric Flair?
I was wondering if you want to wait till we get to the actual scene of him being introduced, because like that's so far in the movie. But I can talk about it because
let's go, because they got so many things right, but there's some things they got really wrong.
Oh, dude, this was even when I alluded to this when I was talking earlier about my overall thoughts. I was like, 99% of the cast was awesome, and that 1% is this dude who they got to play Ric Flair. It was so off. It was so bad. And I even made a video. It was so like I showed Ric Flair doing a promo. I showed this other wrestler, Jay Lethal, who does an impersonation of Ric Flair doing a promo, which is like spot on, by the way. And then I showed the dude in the movie, and you just see the three different, and it's like I was in the theater and I was like, oh, okay, like because you know they had someone play Harley Race, and he looks very similar to Harley Race, and the promo was good. And you know, so I was like, okay, they seem to be getting people, and like people are, you know, basically method acting, essentially. They're training, they're practicing, and this dude comes on screen, and I'm like, what is this? Because this is not even an attempt at the tones or inflections when he talks. There was just not even an effort.
I'm like, does he know who Ric Flair is? Like, anyone can do a Ric Flair, like, the Nature Boy. Like, come on.
Even my mom, I was telling my mom about this, and she was like, yeah, like, I don't watch wrestling, but I know who Ric Flair is. I know what he sounds like. I was like, yeah, you can't get that iconic a person and then get someone to not even attempt to imitate. Like, if he attempted and it wasn't good, I'd still be like, you made the effort.
Yeah.
There was no effort to kind of imitate. They were just like, let's act like this is a totally different character. And I was like, what do you do? Like, it would be like if The Rock, someone impersonated The Rock, but was like the most stoic and just like, you know, talking in first person, and people were like, why that, like, you didn't even talk in third person. You didn't even refer to yourself as The Rock.
Yeah, like, where's the limousine riding, kiss stealing, son of a gun, and like the whole Ric Flair walk? They could have done so many things, but yeah. I agree. The Ric Flair was a little bit of a miss.
Honestly, the easiest solution would have been you do a whole montage of Kevin getting ready, like, you know, he's warming up backstage, and you have that promo by Ric Flair if you can get the rights. I don't know, that might be an issue, but you get someone to do an impersonation of Ric Flair doing that promo as a voiceover while Kevin is getting ready. I think that would have been an easy fix, because then you don't have to worry about getting a person to physically look like him or anything like that. Because I know, like, they're trying to, but sometimes the wigs got me. I was just like, man, these, like, it's just very clear they're wigs. Maybe it's just because it's the time and everything. But
it's 80s hair, man. Like, 80s hair, like, you can't replicate 80s hair on somebody. Just,
I know,
like, it's a thing.
But it was a little, but then you would have still focused on Kevin and like how important this moment is. He's getting this match and everything, versus like trying to do basically a, you know, Easter egg, and a bad one at that.
It was if you're gonna put an Easter egg, make it a good one. I totally agree. No, but they have this match, and you know, Kevin comes out, and then he meets this girl, and she's just like hitting on him, and he's completely oblivious to it. She's being super forward. I really like that. I thought that was really cute, and the fact that they go on a date. He explains the Von Erich curse to her, which is really explaining it to the audience. And we get a little bit of an idea of what that is. The first time we hear it called the Von Erich curse. So that's really, really interesting.
And also,
go for it.
And you explained this already, but he explains wrestling to her and the audience as well. I really like that scene. He explained the whole job promotion concept. You know,
that was good.
And I was like, oh yeah, how come I never thought of it that way? I'm always like, it's a TV show. Like if you watched Lost or This Is Us or whatever, it's the same thing. It's just that it centers around people fighting in a ring. It's no different, but job promotion concept is actually a really great analogy, or like way to explain it to people.
There's cases where you can, like, if you talk about Family Matters, Urkel was a guest star on Family Matters, and then he became the star because the audience connected with him so much. Barney was just a small cast member in How I Met Your Mother, and he became the main star. He got paid the most out of everybody, and it was really interesting. Like, wrestling is the same kind of analogy.
Yeah, I mean, another example is like Boy Meets World, right? Both the actor who played Sean and the actress who played Topanga were not supposed to be consistently on the show. They were just supposed to be like filler characters for like Corey's upbringing, but the chemistry was there, and like the characters worked so well that they made them the cast. Like the three of them were then the cast of the show, you know? So it's like, and wrestling's the same way. Like they can have people, sometimes it happens less now because there's fewer organizations, but there would be instances where a guy from a different company, or like a lower level, he's not in the minor leagues or the independent circuit as they refer to it, comes to WWE because like they just need someone to fill a spot, but then they do so well that they actually will hire them, or for different reasons. Like Jinder Mahal got promoted and pushed because they were trying to appeal to the India market.
Right.
Not
World
a good reason.
champion Jinder Mahal.
Yes, the once and future WWE champion Jinder Mahal got promoted from being a perennial jobber, is the wrestling phrase, someone who does the job, meaning they just basically serve other people. They're just there to make other people look good. He went from that role to being the world champion in the biggest company in history. It's the most absurd thing I've ever seen.
Someone told me that Jinder Mahal is actually the character that was based on the $1 Million Arm movie, where the guy from Mad Men, John Hamm, goes to India and finds cricket players and then brings them to America to train them to be in baseball, and they go in the minor leagues. But one of the two guys was Jinder Mahal, I believe. And when baseball didn't work out, he turned to wrestling. So that's pretty interesting that they're the actual thing. They're the same person.
Yeah.
I had no idea. That's cool.
Yeah, I don't know why. I know a lot of weird wrestling facts. So we see that Kerry is now starting to wrestle, and Kerry, David, and Kevin are doing this 6-man tag matches with the Freebirds, and this is one of the biggest rivalries. And one of the things that WCCW was one of the first to do is this idea of promo videos. Like, promo videos didn't exist before WCCW. They're the ones that would, like, during the week record them and talking shit to each other. That happened in WCCW. Another thing that they kind of coined was the valet. Like, you would have a manager, but like some people would also have a valet, like Miss Elizabeth or Sherry. These things came from WCCW, which is really cool because they were like ahead of everybody, which I thought was really, really interesting. So we kind of get to see they have this big beef with the Fabulous Freebirds. They have beef with Ric Flair. Kevin is they're trying to push Kevin, but it looks like David is the one who's just better on the mic, who's doing a better job. And they decide to push David over Kevin. And Kevin feels a certain way, but he's still happy for his brother. And I think that's really interesting. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I do want to make a quick correction. It wasn't Jinder. It's this other wrestler, this other Indian wrestler. His his in-ring name is Veer Mahan.
Maybe I got the mix.
Yeah, and literally, actually, his one of his moves is like a big clothesline, and he calls it the $1 Million Lariat or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but just
Oh, okay. I knew of the wrestler. I didn't know there were more than one. One Indian wrestlers.
There's a couple of South Asian wrestlers in like the big organizations now.
Yeah, Mustafa Ali was a big.
Yeah, Mustafa, man,
he was good, man.
So good. He's still wrestling now. He started doing independent stuff ever since he got released.
Yeah,
and he's doing like he makes it this whole like presidential tour type thing. Like he's going around the country and he's like doing all these like it's great. He's incredible. Like even when he was so they had like a brand called 205 Live, which was for cruiserweights basically.
Yeah,
and they didn't really care about this brand, right? But they had all these wrestlers because they just had a tournament for cruiserweights. So now they're like, well, we have a bunch of cruiserweight guys, so let's just put them on the show. He would like hire one of his friends to film these like really nicely shot promos for him.
Yeah.
And first he just posts them on his social media, but eventually the company took notice and started airing them on television. And I'm like, this dude put in the work.
Yeah.
And they still disrespected him by not giving him any real opportunities. It's so frustrating because he's super talented, he connects with the crowd. It's just, it's the way they've treated South Asian wrestlers has been not ideal. But back to the movie. Yeah, I think it was really interesting. Because again, this is all new stuff to me. I've known of the Von Erichs, but I don't really know. They're a little before my time. Okay. So I've always known of them. One of the video games I had, they were all in it, like all 5 of them, the father and 4 brothers.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, it's called Legends of Wrestling 2. So they have Fritz, David, Michael, Kerry, and Kevin. So I've known of them. I know they're legendary because they have that legend status, but I didn't really know much detail about them. So, but this makes sense in terms of wrestling, right? Like they don't show who's the better wrestler between David and Kevin, but at the end of the day, promos and talking and your ability to connect with the crowd is what is more likely to get you promoted, to get you pushed higher up in the card. And they showed David taking the mic and just really like Kevin kind of stumbling and struggling. And even like in his pre-taped promos, he was not doing well. He'd keep messing up. Right. So the fact that David was maybe a bit more natural on the mic and the fact that he was connecting with the crowd, it makes sense. Whether it was the right move, I don't know, but like it makes sense in terms of wrestling. Like that's why, and not to say that The Rock isn't a good wrestler, but that's why The Rock is the megastar that he is, because he's so damn charismatic on the mic. Even when I watch his promos that I don't find interesting, the energy still like hits me. Where you're like at this point, I'm not necessarily entertained by The Rock, but I'm like, but I can't deny that he's got that charisma and he's entertaining. Even if I don't care, I can't deny it because he just oozes it, right? Like that phrase oozes charisma was like made for Dwayne Johnson because he uses it. So I thought that was really interesting to show. But again, I love that again, there was a bit of tension, a bit of like Kevin was like, what are you doing, man? Because the father was like, either one of you could go for the championship. So who wants to step up? And Kevin was like, I'll do it. But then David really was like, I want to do it. And they both were, they kind of like got in each other's face a bit, but Kevin was still like, okay, I'm happy for you, you know? And I really appreciate that because it could have been easy to, I don't know what the real story was like, but it could have been easy to just create that tension between the brothers of like, they're all fighting for the father's affection and they're all like basically sabotaging each other and stuff like that. But they didn't. It was they were always together, and I loved that.
They really show that they truly loved wrestling with each other. That was the thing that they loved to do most in life, and you can see that in the movie. And when David gets to go to Japan and he gets to have this big fight and then prepare to get a title match with Ric Flair, we see that Kevin gets married. He starts a family, but when he goes to Japan, he died under a mysterious, illness, which is like a ruptured intestine. And, the movie doesn't go into it, but in real life, they say that he went out drinking. He went out and had like 3 steaks or something like that. And then when he got home, he purged. He threw up so much that he ruptured his intestine. And he was left alone, and he kind of just like died. And if there was somebody else in the room with him, they probably could have saved him. But they don't know. He had an abrasion in his stomach from wrestling. Then he probably vomited because of all the food and drinking he had. And it was a bad mix. And he just happens to die. And then Kevin finds out, his dad finds out, they have a funeral. So many people come to that funeral. And it's just to show you like how much Texas actually cared about this. This was a big deal in Texas. And I thought that was really cool. But you see the mom and she doesn't cry. She's like repressing all her feelings. And I feel like they should have went into that a little bit more. I really did like that. What are your thoughts about when David passed away and how they portrayed that?
Yeah, I thought, and just to go back just a little bit, you were talking about them loving wrestling with each other, and I actually really enjoyed that montage we got when they started doing the trios matches, the 3-on-3, the Freebirds. Because for people who don't know with wrestling, because there were all these territories, what would happen a lot is that wrestlers, whether it's singles like 1v1 or tag teams or whatever, they would actually tour the country. And they go to all these different territories and basically do the same match over and over. But because you're not really televised on a national scale, you don't have to worry. You can do it just for that audience. And so the Freebirds and the Von Erichs wrestled each other so much, just like all around the country constantly. And I really liked that little montage we got of the 3 of them just coming out. They're cutting promos, they're in matches. You could just feel the energy, the music, everything in the movie showed you that they were just having a fun time. And I think that goes to your point of how much they loved wrestling with each other. And even though it was like a glimpse, I love that they highlighted that in that promo, while also sticking true to like history by showing the Freebirds and the Von Erichs just wrestling all over the country. And the death and the setup was really tragic because of the way they did in the movie. Again, I don't know the reality, but like the fact that they had that scene at the wedding where Kevin is checking in on him and saying like, hey, you should go to a hospital, you should see a doctor. And he's like, no, I'm good. I can only imagine if that's true, but even in putting my mind into like the character's position, like that has to weigh on you. Like you he probably feels he could have even tried to do something, but he should have done more.
Yeah.
And if he had done just a little more, I think he may have said something in the movie. It might have been a line or something. But if he had just, in his mind, if he had just done more, if he had just been more pushy about David going to the hospital,
Yeah.
then this would have been avoided. And I think that, and again, Zac Efron just plays it so well of like the weight, especially as this, assuming this oldest brother role,
Right.
or he plays it so well of like how the deaths impact him, his family, and then that looming guilt along with the idea of the curse. Like it is heart-wrenching. Like there's even like just from a movie perspective, like if there was no context of the Von Erichs, like this was just like a fictional narrative, that would still like it would, I would connect emotion. The beat hit is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. So we basically have this funeral, and then right after the funeral, the dad is like, all right, now who's gonna fight Ric Flair? And they're both like, we'll do it. And you're thinking like, why are they thinking about wrestling at a time like this? But that's how important wrestling was back then to them. It was their life. It was their livelihood. But what they did was they ended up deciding to give it to Kerry. And again, they passed over Kevin. But when Kevin got it, they don't show this in the movie, but they actually did like a memorial wrestling match in a stadium, I believe. Like a huge stadium, they did it. And Kerry won the match, the belt from Ric Flair in this match. But like, again, it didn't connect with anybody because it felt like this was David's match. This was David, that he should have been the one. It shouldn't have been Kerry. And Kerry felt that too. And because of that and other reasons, he was missing booking and stuff like that, his title reign was only like 18 days and Flair won it back. So it was one of those things. We really got to see like how it affected him, because we see that once he won that belt, he went and had this motorcycle accident. And this was wild because I didn't know when this motorcycle accident happened. Apparently it happened 2 years after he won the title, but it's still way before he came to the WWF at that time. And that means for every single match that I've seen him in and that I've known him, he's had a fake foot. And I was like, whoa, I had no idea back then. That's insane. That was crazy. But the way they showed the fake foot was like, I knew it was coming. I was still shocked. I was like, oh, I could hear my theater going, oh. And I was like, they shot that really, really well. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think the way they told that whole element of Kerry's, what happens to Kerry, the whole story, but especially that part, because like he's on the motorcycle, he's driving. I'm anticipating like a car coming and them like maybe not showing the crash, but showing something, or like, then it goes black, but it just fades. And I was like, oh, okay, so I know something happens to the man. What happened? And then it leaves you kind of like wondering, and then you see him wake up and he's like cut up. He has like his shoulder is bruised. And he's like, okay, he got into an accident. Then he grabs a crutch and you're like, wait, what is going on? And then he walks down the stairs and like he's it's, I don't know if it was a medium shot, but it's mostly showing like waist up, right?
Yeah.
As he's going down the stairs, and then he walks into the kitchen. It's like a wide low shot.
Yeah.
And then they show that he's missing, his foot.
His foot, yeah.
And so same with you. I was like, oh shoot, like it was just, it was pretty wild. And yeah, it was all really well done. Like the way they revealed it and everything. I think that was one of the really strong parts of the film, because like if you don't know the story and you're just like, okay, what happened? Like what's going on? And I think we're so conditioned with movies, especially of like you're expecting this big accident and this whole thing to happen. And when none of that happens, it kind of throws you off a little bit because you were so familiar with movies wanting that like almost instant gratification of like, let me show you the accident, or let me let you know that an accident happened. Instead, they just it looks like he just drove off into the night and was good. So I thought it was just like a really well done element.
Yeah, I really like the fake out. In real life, though, what happened was he didn't lose the foot in the accident. He actually still had his foot for a while, but he didn't do a good job taking care of it and staying off of it. And because of other complications, he ended up just losing the foot, which
Gotcha.
which kind of sucked. But also, this goes back to the whole curse idea. Now, there's more and more things happening, and then this really bad thing happened to the family, and there's this curse, and to the point where Kevin's like, I don't want my kid to have my last name. Like, that's crazy. That's wild. And because he's really buying into the fact that this is a curse. But since David had died, they started training Mike. Now, Mike wanted to be a musician. He just wanted to make music. He didn't want to be a wrestler. But the movie makes it seem like, because his brother died, he became a wrestler. In real life, he actually became a wrestler way before his brother died. So he was actually already preparing to be a wrestler. But that's not what he always wanted to be still. But he also, now this is where I feel like the pacing is getting crazy, because now we're seeing back to back to back accidents. So he just starts wrestling, and he tries to do some kind of move, and he pops a shoulder. He goes and has shoulder surgery, and he gets toxic something syndrome, like toxic shock syndrome is what he gets. And basically they're operating on the shoulder, and some kind of toxic thing happened, and he was going to die. Like, he was just going to die from the shoulder surgery, and that's crazy. And then they prayed and prayed, and somehow he pulled through, but he was never the same after that. And they kept saying oh, he'll be back in wrestling. He'll be back in wrestling. I think deep down he knew he would never be back in wrestling. He felt like he let his family down, and because of that, he commits suicide. And what he does, they don't show you this, or they don't do a good job showing this in the movie, but he actually took a bunch of pills. He takes a sleeping bag. He goes out to some lake. I believe it's called Lake, I had it in my notes, Louisville or something like that, in Dallas. And he just goes to sleep. And the next day, they're all looking for him and finding him, and they find him near the lake. And he's just dead. And the mom is like, what the hell? I can't even wear this dress to the funeral because people have seen it already. And that was crazy. That was really, really sad. I felt really, really bad. And he, his death was pretty rough. What are your thoughts about Mike's death?
Yeah, like you said, this is where the movie just starts to it spirals into just tragedy center, right? It's just one after the other. So they hit you with David's death, and then, like you said, they even and I get why they changed the timeline of Kerry's accident and everything. It is more impactful that he just won the title, and then he gets, in a motorcycle injury the same night, so it for drama purposes, I get it,
Sure.
Because it definitely hit me. I was just like, damn, that sucks. I was like, I don't think that, even though in my head I was like, I don't think that's how it happened. I have a feeling that's not how it happened, but that really sucks. So it still got me. And then Mike's whole thing happens, and this is where I felt like they needed to, or where more earlier stuff with the father would have been kind of, again, supported this moment more, right? Because it was made evident Mike didn't really want to wrestle. It's not like he was training constantly like the others. They showed the others working out, training, doing different things. Mike was never shown doing that. They showed he had his band and everything. So, but I think if they showed how difficult the father was, maybe it would have just, again, added more to Mike actually ending up wrestling, or trying to be an active wrestler. But yeah, I mean, it's you still got the sense of I don't know if the dad was negative towards him, but I felt there was that, maybe a sense of disappointment or frustration that just yeah, oh, well, another son, another brother is getting this, and it's just like, it was, this one was pretty tough to take in, just because like he was like, I mean, I don't know what age he was in real life. I don't know what age
they were all in their 20s. No one made it past their 30s.
Yeah, so, but you could, like, he has a baby face. You can tell he's very young, and it's just like, he seems like such a innocent, sweet boy, and like this happens and everything, and again, like with Kevin, who knew, he knew Mike may not have been as made for wrestling or wanted to do it as much. He probably, if he had been more strong, if he was stronger towards his dad about like Mike wanting to do whatever he wanted to do, like, again, that's where that was the one thread I could tell they were going with Zac Efron's character. But yeah, it was, and the scene was weird though, because they showed the two of them like wrestling. I think it was Kerry and Kevin were wrestling. They're in their backyard in their ring training. And then all of a sudden I thought I saw Mike in the background, but I guess the scene transitioned, but it was all at night. So it was kind of a little confusing to me. I thought he was walking up to them in the ring, but I guess they like crossfaded or something. I just didn't catch it, because then it was all of a sudden he was just walking alone. I was a little confused by that, but yeah, it was and that's the other thing for the audience too. It's a lot to take in, because it's one after the other after the other. There's no like in between stuff to, like, I'm not saying avoid it or escape it, but there's nothing to like give us a bit of a break or something, give us a moment to breathe before the next thing comes in.
So here's the thing. What actually happened in real life was actually even sadder. So what happens is, when Mike goes to this lake, Kevin goes and he finds him there, and he goes, Mike's alive, and he goes, oh, so you found my note? And he goes, what note? And he's like, oh, okay. And then they get into a little bit of an argument, and he just yells at him to leave. And then Kevin leaves. Kevin leaves, goes to his house, finds a note, realizes it's a suicide note, drives back to the lake, and finds that he passed away. Like, yo, like, the fact the movie had to like dumb down the tragedy, that's crazy. It's sad that they were like, we can't put an audience through this.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, I was telling my friend, because they were interested in watching the movie. I was like, it's a strong movie, it's a worthwhile watch, but it's heavy as hell. Like, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's wild, dude. It's so unfortunate too. Again, like, it's so wild because there's such a legendary wrestling family.
Yeah.
And like, to what you were talking about earlier of like how huge, especially at that time, that wrestling was and is to people. Like your point of so many people came to David's funeral. After 9/11, right? One of the first like live televised events was a WWE SmackDown show. It was maybe 4 or 5 days, maybe a week after 9/11, and it was like a whole tribute show. But it's like, it was a moment. It's one of the most remembered episodes of WWE, just because of its significance in the world, like to the world. And like, same with the pandemic. Like, at the height of the pandemic, everything else was shut down. There were no sports, and there's a lot to discuss about the morality and ethics of them still hosting a show during the pandemic. But the fact that they continued on through the pandemic, they took some measures to try to be safe, and they had an empty arena shows throughout the entire, like, from 2020 to 2022 is when they first started, I think, letting audiences back in. It's just like, wrestling, say what you want about it. There's a lot of issues. As a fan, I have a lot of negative things to say about critiques and criticisms, but there's a power to wrestling in the fact that it's a community for people to really come together. And in the same way that when like any other famous celebrity, like when Heath Ledger passed away and things like that, the fans just rally, and just, it's the same thing with wrestling. But it's almost to a different level, because even though people I know it is scripted, these are people playing characters, but because it's live, and because for the most part they're just being this like more obnoxious and boisterous version of like a person, you feel like you know this person. You know, like I have this huge deep connection to the character of CM Punk for so many reasons. I know the man's name is Phillip Brooks. I know he's probably only somewhat like what he is on TV, but there's such a connection because I've watched this man for over a decade live his life through wrestling. And so yeah, so like it's tragic obviously for the family. It's also tragic as a part of this community, because like to go through to know that the family went through all of this, and like they still made that effort to give themselves to the fans. It's like it's hard to put into words, like the impact.
Wrestling is definitely one of those, I guess, like entertainment programs where they believe the show must go on, right? No matter what, the show must go on. And wrestling is definitely one of those things like that. Well, speaking of, the show must go on, we definitely get to see Kerry, go in and go to the WWF. He gets the title. He comes back. He gives his dad a gun as a present. His dad mentions like his partner Hellwig is doing really good. If you don't know who that is, that's the Ultimate Warrior. If you don't know, back in the day, the Texas Tornado and the Ultimate Warrior had a lot of things. So when the word of suicide came out that Kerry had killed himself, a few years later, the Ultimate Warrior came back to wrestling, and he was much smaller. And there was rumors that like the new Ultimate Warrior is actually the old Texas Tornado, and like that's what's really happening. So the wrestling used to have all these rumors. I remember so many rumors used to fly around and stuff like that. But yeah, the Texas Tornado and the Ultimate Warrior were tag team partners. We see him in SummerSlam. There's a shot in the movie where they show his feet. They show him doing his signature move, which is the Texas Tornado Punch, which is what Kerry's move was. But Kevin's move and some of the other people's move was the Iron Claw, which is what the movie is based off of. The Iron Claw was their dad's move, and he kind of just had a claw, and he would grab your head, and he would make you submit because of that. But yeah, I thought that was really, really fun for them to mention that. But we see that Kerry is also having to struggle with his demons. He's doing drugs, he's doing alcohol, he's got all this stuff. One thing they don't mention is he actually has a family. He has wife and kids. They don't show that in the movie. And he was estranged from them, and he tried to reconnect with them, and it didn't work. And because of that, he commits suicide. But one thing they don't tell you is that Chris, the other brother, actually commits suicide before Kerry. And Chris was actually, all their brothers were like over 6 foot tall, which is also really funny because Zac Efron and Jeremy are like 5'9", 5'8", while the other guys are like 6'4", 6'7". They're like huge. But Chris never grew past 5'5". He was never a big guy. And because he had asthma, he also had like brittle bones and stuff like that. So he like tried a few matches. He was super small. He broke a bunch of, bones, and he just couldn't cut it out in wrestling. And he felt like he let his family down. He felt like he let his family down. And because of that, he took a gun and he shot himself in the head. And it's really interesting because like the way Kevin finds Kerry in the movie is actually what happened to Chris. So they gave Kerry's death to Chris. So Kevin finds him, picks him up, sees the blood, all that stuff that happens to Kerry actually happened to Chris. Now, the way Kerry died was that his father just found him by the tree. So they kind of like, even though Chris isn't in the movie, there are a lot of things about Chris that people have like thrown in here, but like attribute it to the other characters. So I thought that was decent, but it's still very shocking to see like when it happens. But yeah, what are your thoughts about Kerry's death?
Yeah, I mean, gonna sound like a broken record at this point. It's just all, and again, didn't know the like I get why they didn't show he had a family. This would have made it so much worse, dude.
Yeah.
Like, it's so unfortunate, so tragic. There's no other word for it. It's just all tragic. And like, but in the movie, it was really well done, the way they showed it and everything, and like, like specifically the scene of him, taking his life, which is a weird sentence to say now that I realize it. But you know what I mean. The scene was well produced.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that, and there was a bit of, I'll be honest, for me at least, there was a bit of catharsis when he like started choking out his father when Kevin.
Yeah.
I was like, bro, it's about time someone stood up to this man, but his father was still like, he called you, and I was like, you're the father, you're the dang patriarch. You've made it clear that you like run this family, and you're gonna pawn that off on your son.
Yeah.
Like, how awful, dude. That was gut punch. That was a gut punch. I was just like, man. And I didn't want him to kill him, but I was just like, yes, just cause some harm and pain.
Yeah.
I don't know. I need to feel something other than pure misery. Like, so this was like,
yeah,
in a weird way, a bit of not levity, but just this like reprieve from everything else.
Yeah. So one of the things that I have an issue with this movie, and suicide is like a big thing, and I was a suicide listener for like 5 years. Like I that's what I did as community service, just like wanting to help out the community and stuff like that. I did not love the fact that like when Carrie passed away, they showed this like dream sequence and he got to be with his brother, because it almost teetered on the sense of like romanticizing suicide, and that's like something that like I don't like. I don't like for a movie to do something like that. But I understand why they did it, because in his suicide note, he says he wanted to be with his brothers. In real life, not just the movie, even in real life, that's actually what he wrote.
Mm-hmm.
So they have this scene where he's like, tragic stories are contagious in the wrestling industry. Yeah, they definitely are. Dude, I mean, trust me, there's
you do a whole episode on just the tragedies of wrestling.
Yeah, probably one of the biggest ones, the Chris Benoit, Owen Hart. There's so many tough ones.
Eddie Guerrero.
God. Chris Benoit, like that just unlocked a latent memory.
Yeah.
Was it 07, 08-ish? Like,
it was 06 to 7, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can't remember. It was like right when I was graduating either high school or college is when I remember.
Yeah, man.
It was 07, because Eddie died in 05. And then like barely a year or two later, Benoit. Then not even want to get into that, dude.
Shoot, the Hart family, another one, man. Owen, the British Bulldog, there's a lot of them.
Brian
Pillman, yeah.
I mean, there's an interview with Roddy Piper, and the dude says, he's like talking about like basically how wrestlers lack healthcare, they don't have any other skills, like that's all they do. And he's like, oh, we get our retirement at 65. He's like, I'm not making it to 65.
Yeah.
And he didn't. Like the 80s, the 70s, 80s wrestlers, just full of tragedy. Like, even the 90s, there's a lot in the 90s, but like the 90s, they started to sort of begin to clean up things. And like now in the mid 2000s, things they started to really like clean up on in terms of like drug and alcohol, substance abuse and everything like that, getting wrestlers rehab, all these different, making sure like just physically as well, right? Like they used to, as they kind of showed in the film, right? They'd get hurt, but they just keep wrestling. And yes, they do that to a degree, but not to the degree that they used to, where like they still wrestle with concussions, like real life concussions, not storyline concussions.
Kurt Angle.
Real life concussions, real life broken bones and like torn muscles. They'd still wrestle. And now it's like, oh, you do that, you go get taken care of. Thank goodness. But yeah, it's this other comment of, in a totally different tone, finishing moves were so goofy back in the day. Yes, they absolutely were.
Yeah. The Iron Claw is not so much different than Sacco, Mr. Sacco. Okay,
right.
That's true.
That's true.
But yeah, so the movie ends with Zach seeing his brothers, and the director told him that he's not allowed to. Zach actually does not cry throughout the entire movie until this scene, and it's like almost cathartic because like we, when we see this, I don't know if I can get through this without crying, but like he says this line: "I used to be a brother, and now I'm not a brother anymore." You want to know what the real line was? The real line was even sadder.
Oh goodness, go for it. We're here.
This is gonna be rough. I don't know if I can say this because I'm gonna cry in between. Because the real line was, "I was always a big brother, and now I'm not even a brother."
Damn.
Yeah, jeez.
Fuck.
Yeah.
So sad.
So he said that to his sons?
He said that in an interview.
Oh, okay. No.
So yeah, he didn't say it to his sons. He basically, when after a lot of this tragedy happened, they interviewed him, and he goes like, "I have always been a big brother. Now I'm not even a brother."
Oh gosh. Yeah.
That's sad, bro. Oh, that. Like, I'm kind of glad they didn't put the real quote in there because I would have broken down. That's a rough. That's a rough line.
I wish they did.
I kind of wish they did too because it's more
an A24
stronger
movie. I wish they brought in all of it.
Yeah. That was one of the reasons I was actually really cautiously optimistic for this film, though.
Yeah.
Was because if it was like Fox or something, or I guess not, but like if it was one of the other bigger companies, I don't know, I would have been a bit more like skeptical. But because it was A24, I was like, they do stuff. They put in the work and put in the effort, for these, especially these kinds of like serious toned films.
Yeah.
So I was like, they're gonna treat, to your point in the beginning that you said, I believe they were gonna treat wrestling with respect, which is always my concern when wrestling is brought up in media, because it's looked at like a lower class type of thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's treated as a joke and it's viewed as silly. And it is. This is the thing. If people understood that wrestling is silly and that's the whole point of it, they'd have so much more fun. Like,
yeah, for sure.
So it's real and it's serious. Okay.
I mean, how many times is the Undertaker going to die and come back to life? Come on, guys.
Hey, man, he has 9 lives. Okay.
Listen, if you can't enjoy Stone Cold clinking Vince McMahon in the head with a bedpan, I don't know.
I don't know what to tell you.
What entertainment is to you then? Like the sheer sound of the head meeting the bedpan is it's hilarious. It's amazing.
Yeah. No. I totally agree. Someone says, it's fake, right? I always hate that argument. Yeah, it's such a dumb argument because like all movies are fake. You still enjoy those, don't you? Like I don't get it.
But this is like the point I was making, right? Is because it's live, people, even though they know it's fake, they still view it in a certain way because it's not a movie, right? It's not pre-recorded and it's not this like fictional narrative in there, like the way that we're used to fictional narratives, right?
Yeah.
So because of all of this stuff, even people who don't like it, they have such a weird opinion of it. Like they have such an opinion of it because it watching wrestling is so different. There is literally nothing like wrestling, right? So they also said it's a reality show. It is, but it's also a comedy. It's also a drama. It's also, a sketch show. It's improv because like
it's theater.
Yeah, it's theater. Yeah. It's theater. And like it's comic books come to life. These are people that you would never just see in real life, like on a regular day. Like you go to wherever your local coffee shop or you go to your place of business, you're not going to see some 6'7" dude who like just towers over you wearing this black trench coat, just haunting your dreams. Like that's not happening. Yeah. So like it's superheroes, though. Dude, it's iconic. But that's wrestling, right? You get these larger than life characters just like superheroes. You're not going to see someone like Bruce Wayne on the streets, but you're going to see him in a comic book. And what does he do? He gets in, well, his suit isn't as flamboyant and like, colorful, but he gets in his crazy suits and he goes and fights people. It's literally wrestling. It's literally wrestling. Like his comic books come to life.
It really is, but it's not just, but this movie is not just wrestling, but it's also Shakespearean in a way. It's like a Shakespearean tragedy.
Yeah.
And it's so sad that like some of the saddest part is actually removed from the movie, to the point where like if they put all this stuff in there, it wouldn't be believable. Like people would be like how much tragedy can one family go through? And it's really, really sad. As someone who has brothers who used to wrestle with them, I know how much those memories mean to me and stuff like that. It's really cool. Wrestling was a big part of my life because that's all we did. We watched wrestling every single week. But it's a sad movie. I probably will never watch it again, but I love it for what it is. I think it's great. I think some of the performances are some of the best I've ever seen. It is really, really good to see wrestling shown in this way, even though it's a tragedy. Anyways, those are my thoughts about the movie. Any final thoughts before we go? Nuv?
I think you summed it up when you said that it's a great movie, but I probably will never watch it again.
Yeah.
That was like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I'm like, I have enough in my brain that I don't need to actually revisit it, like watch it again, because like it's too much, you know. But like, I gave all the flowers to Zac Efron already, but I do want to give a lot of props to Jeremy Allen White. Like he really, like, I felt he and Zac really like took on those roles and just like brought them to life. And I don't know the actor's name who plays the father, but like he also did a great job, and he looks a lot like the actual father.
Does.
Like I looked up a picture afterwards, I was like, wait a minute, is that the same dude?
Yeah. But honestly, they all did a good job, minus the height. They all did a good job of like their body transformation and their face and their hair. They did a really good job. In fact, I would say that Zac Efron was actually more built than Kevin, because Kevin was kind of lean. But Carrie was a monster. Carrie was huge.
Yeah.
But they all did a really, really good job trying to encapsulate their characters.
Yeah. Like I said, I think it's a worthwhile watch, but you have to be in the right mood for that kind of film, you know? Like, I don't even know if there's the right mood, but you have to at least be in the right mindset when you're going in. Like, okay,
it's the right mood.
There is going to be a lot. It's like the mindset is it's heavy. It's going to be heavy. I'm going to feel the weight of all of that. That's the mindset you have to go in with, because you're right. There is no mood for it. But like, you just gotta be like, I'm prepared to like face a lot of adversity.
Yeah, no, for sure. Jazz, do you have any final thoughts?
I'm thinking we should end the show with the Undertaker's 31st theme song.
Do you have it queued
iconic
up?
One. Oh, yes, I do.
Go for it. Let's go. Oh, but before we do, Nav, can you tell people where they can find you real quick?
Sure. At Nuv the Poet, N-A-V the Poet, no spaces or underscores, on Instagram, TikTok, Threads I use sometimes. Those are the main, I mean, Nuv the Poet anywhere, but those are the 3 platforms I'm most active on. So yeah, catch me there.
All right, Nuv, we love you, man. Thanks for coming on the show. Love talking wrestling with you. If we do more and more wrestling content, we may have you back.
Can we do? I haven't seen this film actually. It's a couple years old, but it's way more cheery and fun. It's called Fighting with My Family.
Oh yeah, that's the one with the Rock's in it, right?
Yeah, it's with Florence Pugh.
Florence Pugh. She plays AJ Styles. Is that who she
plays?
Is?
Paige.
Sorry, yeah. That's who
but it's a way more fun movie. I haven't seen it yet, so I'll watch it if you want to do an episode on it.
We can do an episode on that. I wouldn't mind. I watched it on the plane. It was really good.
Yeah.
All right, Jazz. Take it away.
Fitting, but really not needed right now.
No, you will suffer through this with me.
I love this scene, don't get me wrong.
You want to know something funny? Right now, my brother actually walked to his wedding to this song.
That's amazing.
What?
Yeah, but it was like an acoustic piano version of it.
At the wedding, I wish I was that, man. That's amazing. I would have popped the second I heard it.
They walked down the aisle to the song.
I can actually, I don't know if I can still do it, but
All right, guys. I think that's enough. Until next time, guys. Salaam nerds.
Peace.